continuing coverage. The president is going to speak to the nation tonight at 8 p.m. Brian Williams will continue our coverage here on MSNBC, and as I assume, there will be more breaking news throughout the afternoon.
Including a meeting with congressional leaders at 5:45 this afternoon, so stay right here with MSNBC. And John and I will see you back here tomorrow.
See you then.
Business Traveler's Forecast is brought to you by Priceline.com.
Our satellite pictures show us swirling in the clouds centered near the Florida Panhandle. That represents an upper air disturbance, which is producing rain and thunderstorms. The AccuWeather forecast for Charlotte and for Atlanta, calling for periods of rain, maybe an afternoon or evening thunderstorm. Also be a couple of thunderstorms in the Orlando area. But Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, New York City, Washington will have a partly sunny and unseasonably warm day once again today.
I'm saving $160 a night at this 4-star hotel.
A 3-star for $59 a night.
We're saving $100 a night in New York City.
We even got the kids in their own room.
Priceline now has the guaranteed best prices at top-of-the-line hotels. Save up to 40% off other leading online sites.
I paid $55 less than at Hotels.com.
$60 less than Expedia. I told them the price.
The exact neighborhood.
And even how many stars. And they found it.
Now we'll stay at a hotel instead of the in-laws.
Top-of-the-line, guaranteed best price. Priceline Hotels.
A1 steak sauce. Yeah, it's that important.
It's almost 200,000 people working as one to turn technology into reality. To create an award-winning fluid suspension system so unique, it's Automobile Magazine's Technology of the Year. To deliver a portable satellite radio system that can go beyond your car to just about anywhere you want to take it. To design technologies that can survive the extremes of racing, and to do it all at the speed of Delphi. Gotta
go. You see an energy crisis crippling a city. At Franklin Templeton Investments, we saw a chance to uncover value in a troubled utility through the hands-on approach of our Mutual Series fund managers. Generating returns for shareholders in situations like this requires a unique perspective, the kind that has made Mutual Series a leader in value investing. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
Right now at LensCrafters, all lenses are 50% off. That's right, every lens in the store, 50% off. Still made in about an hour. All with our 30-day money-back guarantee. Where else can you get all that?
Hurry, LensCrafters offer ends March 22nd.
Right now during Lobster Fest, we've got the best thing to appear on pizza since pepperoni. It's lobster. Try our new delicious lobster pizza appetizer, topped with fresh tomatoes, basil, parmesan, and did we mention lobster? Lobster pizza right now at Red Lobster.
All right, bye.
Looking for really tough virus protection? Switch to new MSN 8. Sign up now and get virus protection that automatically scans your email, plus 2 months free. It's better with the Butterfly. Call 866-TRY-MSN 8 today.
Can you lose weight and still live your life?
No problem. Slim Fast made it very easy.
I never felt deprived of anything, and I was losing weight.
Hey, we're talking choices.
Rich, creamy shakes, meal on the go bars.
Slim Fast has snack bars. You can take it anywhere.
Now let's talk taste.
Oh my gosh, the Slim Fast shakes are so delicious.
Just like a chocolate milkshake from an ice cream store. Slim Fast worked great for me.
And it just works for me.
And it felt like I was doing it the right way.
Slim Fast, it's your life. Feed it right.
That was great, Mom. I saw 5 snakes. I got a
fish. Do what you wanna do.
Now there's a new and different way to treat seasonal allergies. Singulair, the only seasonal allergy medicine that specifically blocks leukotrienes, an underlying cause of allergy symptoms. It's a once-a-day chewable tablet that helps relieve a broad range of symptoms for a full 24 hours. It's available for children as young as 2. Side effects are generally mild and vary by age and may include headache, ear infection, sore throat, and upper respiratory infection. Ask your child's doctor about Singulair.
Good day to you. Noon Eastern Time in the U.S., 8 p.m. right now here in Kuwait City, the headquarters for this hour of our continuing live NBC News coverage, and a lot to report as we come on the air this hour. A lot of familiar feelings certainly here in Kuwait City, throughout this region of the world, going back a decade or more. We're going to begin with NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell in Washington. Andrea, the president to address the nation at 8 p.m., and the rest of that is fairly easy to predict.
Indeed, the president will be giving an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, and this was explained earlier today when Secretary of State Colin Powell acknowledged that diplomacy has ended, has failed at the United Nations, even as the Security Council is meeting at this hour, Brian. This is Secretary Powell announcing that the president will finally call to the end to diplomacy tonight.
In his speech, he clearly will issue an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein that the only way to avoid the serious consequences that were built into 1441 is for Saddam Hussein and his immediate cohort to leave the country and to allow this matter to be resolved through the peaceful entry of force and not a conflict.
What he was talking about is the peaceful entry of force. So clearly there would be military action with or without Saddam Hussein's exile. But it is very, very doubtful, according to American intelligence, that Saddam Hussein would take this last opportunity to leave and leave with his immediate family, closest immediate supporters and military officials there. There is a list of about 9 who are slated for war crimes allegations, according to American officials. But that would still mean that the U.S. would enter Iraq, would try to find the weapons of mass destruction, would root out the rest of the Ba'ath Party regime and the immediate people around Saddam Hussein, and would take control for at least several months until a peaceful and more democratic process could be put in place. Brian?
Now, Andrea, what happens in your part of the world, foreign affairs, diplomacy, now that it looks like we're seeing a change in the game? This will be presumably a war-themed speech by the president tonight. What stance does the U.S. go into now regarding its friends, not necessarily allies, as we've learned, but friends around the world?
There is a great deal of blame and finger-pointing today already. The UN ambassadors from Great Britain and the United States and Colin Powell all blaming France, saying that overnight they made calls, the president made calls from Air Force One traveling back to the United States. Blair made calls from London, and he has had the resignation of Robin Cook, the former foreign secretary, from his cabinet ministry today in protest over the war move. And Colin Powell was on the phone starting at 7:30 this morning. They didn't get the votes together. They weren't going to get 9 votes together. And really all was over by the time that the president and Tony Blair addressed the cameras and the world yesterday in the Azores, that diplomacy had come to a halt. But they went through the motions, at least, and finally pulled the plug on diplomacy at 10 o'clock this morning Eastern Time at the United Nations. The Security Council is still meeting. This, as UN weapons inspectors have been told by the United States to get out of Dodge, get out of Baghdad, and they have to make a decision to tell the inspectors to leave. The information we're getting from Baghdad is that they would spend the night and then leave tomorrow if ordered. This was very controversial back in 1998 when the former chief weapons inspector, Richard Butler, decided to pull them out because the U.S. strike was imminent and did not go through the motions of telling the Security Council and Kofi Annan. So they're going through that process right now. The French were still pushing as early as this morning, or as late as this morning, to try to get the foreign ministers of all the Security Council members to Washington for a big meeting, a crisis meeting tomorrow. But the U.S. and Great Britain have basically preempted that by saying that diplomacy is at an end. But the French may still be pushing for that inside the Security Council meeting, which is still in progress.
The diplomacy of it all from Andrea Mitchell in our Washington bureau. Thanks, Andrea, for that. Cross town now in Washington to the White House. NBC News correspondent David Gregory is there. And David, I guess the first hint that this was coming came yesterday. The trip to the Azores, the president was accompanied by Karen Hughes and Mike Gerson, the two people who really have his voice in terms of all the major addresses he's given as president.
It's true, Brian, and really as of last Friday, we knew that by the end of the weekend, the president, the vice president who appeared on NBC were going to make the case that the diplomatic window had to come to an end. There was no optimism really the end of last week that a diplomatic breakthrough was possible. That was reiterated yesterday from the Azores and from the vice president as well, and it didn't take long, as Andrea has been reporting, for them to make an assessment this morning that that movement really wasn't possible, and thus the president will speak tonight at 8 o'clock. He will tell Saddam Hussein that the only way to avoid war now is for him to get out of the country, Colin Powell adding, it's not just about Saddam Hussein, but his immediate cohorts. This is about ending the Iraqi regime. That's a major objective of any military operation that appears inevitable at this point. And so it's not simply a matter of Saddam Hussein leaving the country, but those closest to him who really make up the muscle end of the Iraqi regime. There will be discussion tonight of a deadline. A deadline has been on the lips of White House officials for a couple of weeks now. Look for the president to perhaps talk anywhere from 48 to 72 hours in terms of the length of time that Saddam Hussein would have to get out of the country. This will all happen in short order as the president tonight will make the case for why war is necessary as he prepares the country and the world, Brian.
David Gregory, I know we'll be talking to you a lot more along the way. Of course, the story headquartered there in the White House behind you tonight goes without saying. A live coverage of the speech here on MSNBC. Actually, we'll cover it live here out of Kuwait City tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. David, thanks. Now to a military story that has been breaking kind of all around us here over the past hour. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski is with us from his office at the Pentagon. And Mick, what do you have to report having to do with Saddam Hussein in Iraq?
Well, Brian, Saddam Hussein is obviously preparing for war, according to U.S. military and intelligence officials. It's being reported now, and we must say that these reports are somewhat sketchy and not totally confirmed, but that apparently Saddam Hussein or his military have opened up an oil pipeline in the southern portions of Iraq, in the southern oil fields, and that already quite a large spill has been created. The exact reason for that is totally unknown, if in fact it is the case, so we continue to chase that. But we're also finding out today that the dispersal of Saddam Hussein's military troops has been stepped up significantly just today. We're told that 5 of 6 Republican Guard brigades have now been dispersed out of garrison, that is to spread out, to make them a more difficult target to hit with U.S. military bombs and warplanes. And the only thing that is apparently not moving in terms of military are those special Republican Guards. Several thousand of those inside Baghdad apparently continue to hold their positions. That would be the last line of defense probably for Saddam Hussein if he were to ride this out. And in regard to any kind of offer of exile, there is no indication, according to U.S. officials, that Saddam Hussein or any of his closest advisors or family members are preparing to take anybody up on that offer. And those people who are said to know Saddam Hussein said it's quite likely that he would fight to the death, but along the way could have some very serious surprises for the U.S. military.
All right, a lot to talk about. Jim Miklaszewski from the Pentagon, thanks. And gentlemen, we will be turning to throughout our coverage. General Wayne Downing is with us from our headquarters here in Kuwait City, retired 4-star general, a man who has been at this before, that is to say, sent troops into battle the last time the United States launched a war in this region. He has been the counselor on terrorism to President Bush and former commander-in-chief of all special operations in this country. And General, we know about Saddam Hussein. He has been willing to use oil as a weapon, as certainly an annoyance and a weapon to the environment before. Would this, if it's true, make sense to you as a tactic? It will burn up the Bush administration, that's for sure.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, this is one scenario that we really wanted to avoid. We wanted to be able to see this country have a regime change, but have the economic resources that they're going to need to rebuild the country. And certainly those oil fields are needed to pay for this reconstruction, to put this country back on its feet. So I am confident that we have plans to deal with this kind of thing. This is a very provocative act. It is something that we hoped would curtail, foreclose, but it does, if this is true, and it may not be true, and it's certainly plausible, then this could be something that could cause us to go early. Because you not only have these big fields here in the south, you also have a very, very large field up north in Kirkuk. And of course, one of the ramifications of the Turks not granting us military access through Turkey is that very, very capable armored force that the United States was expected to put into that northern flank that could very rapidly close down there on Kirkuk is not going to be available. So it means the risk goes up, and we may have to look for other type of military options to secure those fields. But if Mick's report is correct, this is not good. We're going to have to do something about it.
As a special ops guy, can you insert and surround and ward off the folks that opened up the pipeline, and can you secure it? But it seems to me almost like you needed Red Air to turn out the fires last time. You need someone who knows what they're doing, almost a civilian, to cap it.
Well, I think we've got people that know how to do this. I think the military has done their contingency planning, not only for a fire, although Mick did not mention a fire here, just that the wells were running. I think we've got people that know how to do that. So yes, we could go in, but of course if we go in, it's going to be going in early. It means a lot of the suppression of the air defenses that we would like to do before you say take a force up there in helicopters or drop them by parachute. May not be done, or may not be done, or may be done just incompletely, so this risk factor goes up. But I think this is something that, Brian, could perhaps cause us to advance a D-Day and advance an H-hour.
If you're Tommy Franks, however, you have clearly called the president and said, on your order, we're ready. He's got to be ready. So what would scare Tommy Franks about moving up the D-Day or H-hour other than the air defense point you raised?
Well, there's a lot of other things that have to be done. In other words, this is not a off-on switch. There's a lot of preparation of the battlefield, intelligence activities, special operations activities, CIA covert action activities that you'd like to take place. You may not have time for that.
And one final point, General, for the people in the United States who are perhaps surprised at the speed of this here at the last closing stages, the president speaking tonight, talk of a clock starting. When you arrived here in country, perhaps months ago, was there any doubt in your mind this was a go?
I really thought that it was a strong possibility. I didn't see any way that we would not do this, because I saw no backsliding on Saddam's part, no willingness to step down. I really agree that he will not do this. And then we ran into these tremendous problems with the inspections and the United Nations. It just appeared to me 8 or 9 months ago that this would go to military force.
General Wayne Downing, thanks. Good to have your counsel. We'll talk to you along the way. There's been a lot in the news today concerning Baghdad, especially the presence of Western reporters there. Danger to any Westerners in the city should this attack get underway. After a break, we will go live to one of the shrinking number of journalists remaining in that city right after this. We are back in Kuwait City, and beginning with the president's talk to the nation at 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. For those who were around the last time the nation was at this, the last Persian Gulf War, a lot of the feelings and emotions, and perhaps, depending on where you are, fears, may start to look and sound and feel familiar. One of the iconic images from the last war is with us live from Baghdad right now. My colleague Peter Arnett, who is working for MSNBC National Geographic Explorer. Peter, I know that NBC News withdrew its network crew today. You are still in Baghdad. Is your plan to stay there for the duration?
That is my plan. I'm here with a team from National Geographic Explorer. We're convinced that the significance of the battle for Baghdad is more really important than the dangers. I would point out that NBC's Iraqi crew is in place here. There are several well-trained and loyal to NBC Iraqis who are actually the technicians on this shoot tonight. But we believe the story's so important we have to cover it. And you know, Brian, there's about 100 other journalists or 120 other journalists from around the world who feel the same way at this point.
Peter, part of the president's speech tonight, U.S. time, I am quite sure, is going to include a warning to Americans and their dependents in Baghdad, and perhaps he'll broaden it out to include other nations here in our region. What can you do in the center of town to try to ensure your safety, and how do you feel this time about the safety of the Al Rashid Hotel, which was, of course, your haven during the last war?
Well, I personally am convinced that the Al Rashid is probably safe from any attack. My colleagues feel that if there is as much missile fire and bombing as is planned, apparently planned by the Pentagon, maybe there'll be more stray missiles hitting that edifice. So basically, everyone's moving out of the Al Rashid to alternative hotels in less targetable areas. But overall, though, I think that, you know, we have enlisted the cooperation of the Iraqi authorities. We've told them we're here. They've said they will try to enable us to do credible reporting. They will assist us. And they point to the fact that there are embedded American reporters and international reporters with the American forces. They say they're under a certain amount of restriction. They're under danger. And they say that here on this side, they're willing to try and give the consideration that our colleagues are getting on the soon-to-be advancing forces. Brian.
Peter, a two-part question. Number one, are you accompanied right now and or monitored as you talk to us where you are and not necessarily off air? And number two, is part of the point you're trying to make that you feel that the assets will be so finely targeted in this conflict, including building sites, but including Saddam Hussein himself, that you can name a finite number of places that are going to be unscathed?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out, Brian. But of course, we don't know, you know, to what degree this war will develop. I think this war is much more than the first 48 hours of bombing. But it goes on to a potential ground attack, which the Iraqis keep saying that they will present, they will fight with great determination. That's basically how we feel about it.
Peter Arnett in Baghdad. Again, he is there with a crew from National Geographic Explorer on MSNBC. And as Peter mentioned, technicians who are Iraqis loyal to NBC News, who've worked for the organization for a long time. Peter, we'll be talking to you, I'm sure, along the way, and I'm sure before this conflict, if we're correct in our assumption that it is starting, gets underway. Peter Arnett, our thanks. We'll take a break, and our coverage will continue from Kuwait City right after this.
Not, for example, handle the oil for food when we do not have inspectors to monitor the imports. We do not have oil inspectors who will monitor exports of oil, and we don't have the humanitarian personnel who would monitor the distribution, receipt and distribution of the food supplies. So I have informed the Council of these suspensions. This does not mean that should war come to Iraq, that the UN will sit back and not do anything to help the Iraqi population. We will find a way of resuming our humanitarian activities to help the Iraqi people who have suffered for so long, and do whatever we can to give them assistance and support. And as you know, we have undertaken major contingency planning to be able to move forward as soon as we can.
did you get an authorization from the Security Council to withdraw these inspectors, or did you use the measures you have available to you, temporary relocation of the inspectors?
It is a relocation of the inspectors, and the council has taken note of my decision.
Secretary General, should the United States go ahead?
There is a man who will be sad if this ends, as many believe it will, as it sure looks like it will in this region, without the UN having voted certainly on a second resolution. That is Kofi Annan appearing live right now at the UN. What we missed is his announcement to pull humanitarian staff and inspectors out of Iraq prior to, again, what's widely believed to be a fast and massive U.S. attack that may be hours, if not days, away. For more on this and just what the president is going through, we want to bring in a frequent guest of ours, David Gergen, a veteran of the White House West Wing, of course. He's up at the days and editor-at-large of U.S. News. David, let's play Which Is It? The kind of melodramatic coverage we saw in places like Time magazine this past week, the loneliness of the president's job and decision-making process at the top, or the fact that when you travel through this area and talk to military commanders, you realize this war has been in the planning stages for a long time. They've had buildings built here and bases going up for certainly more than a year. What does that make of the decision-making process? Which is it?
I think it's much closer to the latter, Brian, and I think it's so helpful that you're there to be able to see this firsthand and tell us and help us understand that this is underscore that this has been in the making for a long time. The United States has been preparing for a war. There have been people in the administration who have wanted this war since 24 to 48 hours after the 11th of September. Indeed, there are people in the administration who wanted this war from the day they got into office before September 11th. So this military buildup, I think, is all along the United States has felt the center of gravity in the administration has been that this is going to be settled by war, not by diplomacy and not by inspections. We now have a train wreck at the United Nations, and all of us are pausing today and sort of thinking, oh my God, how did we ever get here to this situation where we cannot get out of the United Nations with 9 votes in the Security Council. But by tomorrow, I think the attention will be shifting over to the military aspects of this. And in these circumstances, Brian, within the White House, even if you have planned as they have, I am sure that among most of the people around the president, there is a sense of awe and of quietness because they realize they're at a momentous time in their lives as public servants, a time that's really important for history. And they must have, in the back of their minds, they must be running through a whole mental checklist every hour. Okay, it's not only Iraq. But what about terrorists in our own country? Are we going to see an outbreak of terrorism somewhere in the United States in the next few days? What are we going to do about North Korea? Is North Korea going to start misbehaving during the midst of this? Or are we going to be really faced with a crisis shortly after Iraq is over? So there are a whole myriad of issues that they have to face, in addition to the fact that while Americans will rally around the president, and especially rally around their troops, much of the world is going to be protesting what we're about to do.
David, we're going to go back, dip into more of Kofi Annan at the United Nations. I understand he was asked a question about military action here in the region, specifically Iraq. Let's listen for a moment.
Out of the Azures, that the UN has an important role to play in post-conflict Iraq. And the Council will have to discuss that. The Council will have to give me a mandate for some of the activities that we will need to undertake. And so this does not mean end of involvement of the UN in the Iraqi situation. Thank you very much.
And so much for the Secretary General's comments. Again, the headline out of that is he's pulling the inspectors, he's pulling all the civilian humanitarian workers out of the UN. David, back to our discussion. You so nicely framed the issues around the world. When you look at this, what this administration is about to launch here, vis-a-vis what else is on their palette, North Korea, war on terrorism in the United States, it is, in one way of thinking, such a bold move to also do this. Are you surprised at the stakes here?
I'm deeply surprised and distressed about the train wreck of the United Nations. It was profoundly in our interest to go into war in Iraq with the United Nations flag flying, that this be something with the legitimacy and the moral backing of the UN. The fact that that has not happened, I think, is a real setback in all sorts of ways for the institution and for the United States. And I'm sorry they couldn't find a way to compromise this. And the French and the others do bear a lot of the responsibility, as well as the United Nations, the United States. This is not simply our problem, it's everybody's problem. Having said that, one can't be surprised about the fact we're going to go to war with Iraq. The president has been on this course. And one thing that we have learned about George W. Bush is that once he sets his course, he sticks to it. Now, some will say that's terrific. We look for the resoluteness like this in the president. We haven't seen it in a while. Others will say this is a rigidity. He's not listening. He doesn't get it, that there's so many other people around the world are opposed to this. And I think this is going to be an extraordinarily divisive moment when many are going to feel that the president has done absolutely the right thing, and many are going to feel this is radical, and we are terribly upset by it.
And it does seem to cut right down those very lines. David, hang here with us once again. Jeremy Greenstock, the UK's ambassador to the UN, is speaking. This has been a very divisive issue as well in that country. Let's listen in.
Until when are you leaving it on the table, this draft resolution?
There is no date left for it to remain on the table. It just stays on the table.
Do you honestly believe that if no country had threatened to use a veto, you would have won 9 votes on the Security Council for your draft?
We believe that that particular intention to veto whatever the circumstances affected the framework for others to take their decisions, yes. Thank you very much.
Jeremy Greenstock of the UK appearing before the microphones. And David, you mentioned the United States and how this has split people wide open. There is, we're going to go right back to the microphone. Maybe we should devote our broadcast to who's speaking at that microphone. Here's the U.S. ambassador.
It's been 4 months now since the passage of 1441, which called on the government of Iraq to immediately and unconditionally disarm. It's clear that after this 4-month period that they have failed to comply. We sought a resolution that would have stated that Iraq had failed to take advantage of the final opportunity offered to it by Security Council Resolution 1441. But in light of the threat of a veto by one of the countries, even though we think the vote would have been close, we decided under the circumstances not to put that resolution to a vote. And so now we are at the situation that has been described to you on various occasions this morning. But I'd be pleased to take any questions you might have.
Yes. How close was that vote?
Well, I don't want to get into that. I think that, as we said, we believe it was close. And as Ambassador Greenstock said, we think that the atmosphere and the context of our entire discussion